Hey everyone, welcome to the Socality Show. My name is Scott Bakken, and we're so excited to be talking to creators, empowering you in these conversations. And today our guest is the one, the only Richard Bernardin, all the way from Montreal, Canada, an incredible commercial photographer who shoots for everything from Vogue and everything like that. I'll let you tell us all about that. But Richard is a true example of what it is like to be an professional photographer. So everybody on social, everybody that's creating, we know that this conversation is going to be great for you today, especially empowering you to step into a whole new world of commercial shooting. And Richard, you've done it all. And I've had the opportunity to talk to you and hear some wild stories from you, but you are definitely someone who has solidified yourself in the market as an incredible photographer, commercial shooter. And I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. You're an awesome guy, and you've been to lots of our SoCality events. And so it is great to be chatting to you today. So everyone, welcome Richard today, and it's going to be a great conversation. So
thank you.
We finally nailed you down. For those who are watching, it's constant texting with Richard when we're doing things, and finally we hear from him because he's like, "I'm in New York, I'm in Egypt, I'm in, I'm in LA, I'm in, all over which is so exciting." But today you're on the Socality Show, and so I know our listeners are going to be really encouraged by this conversation. So why don't we just ask you a few questions? First of all, talk to us a bit about, where you're from, a little bit about what you do, and then maybe some family life stuff, and let's get into some good conversation about all of this stuff.
Look, that intro was amazing. If I could blush, I would. But anyway, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Like you said, I totally believe in Socality. I love the events you guys put together. It's something that, I've been working for 25 years in my career as a photographer, and between the work that I do, I don't consider it work, but the collaboration that I do with you and with Canon Canada as an ambassador, it's fulfilling to be able to give back and to share my experience and my knowledge. And so I'm truly grateful that you invited me to do this today. So,
yeah, no, and we appreciate that you've done that. You've come to our events. You've invested into the community with all your wisdom. So we appreciate that. So
amazing. So yeah. Like I said, I've been shooting. I've been a professional photographer for 25 years. I've been shooting for maybe 30. I got into it just life. I served in the military in the United States, and when I came back from my service, I knew that I wanted to get into photography. I love my first passion actually in life was film, cinema. I've always been influenced by film since I was a kid. I saw Indiana Jones, I want to become an archaeologist. That's the way I was. So, but I love storytelling. I'm always telling stories, and I felt that it was a great way for me to do that. But we're talking early 90s. So this is
I was just doing the math. I was doing the math in my head, and I'm thinking back then, were you taking on the film and dropping it off, waiting for it to come back and see the pictures?
Well, that's the thing. So look, when I came back, all my friends were in film school. So I'm like, oh, okay. I was thinking about it, and we'd hang out. And back then you could smoke and drink coffee in these coffee houses, and
yes,
we were there all day, And it got to a point, seriously, it didn't take me long, but after a week, I'm like, wait a second, guys. We're talking about all these films. We're coming up with ideas. We're conceptualizing. We're breaking it down. We're looking at scenes and how to compose it and how to do shots and whatnot. And they would not do it. They couldn't do it because it was pre-internet, pre-digital. So it was all, you had to have film stock. You needed the gear, and they were in film school. So there was one camera to be shared between 20 people. And I'm like, no, I told them, it was like, for me, it's like dating the pretty girl at school and not being able to kiss her. It was the same principle. I'm like, how can you have all these ideas and not actualize them?
Right.
So I was like, wait, I have I had already experimented with photography. So I was like, you know what? I need to let me do these but film stills, and that's how I started. I went to New York. I assisted. I gained my knowledge through working with some very great photographers. But when I started experimenting, for me it was that I was telling stories, and I was creating but in one pane. And
Mm,
what I discovered was, which was I had no idea that this would come about, was that every time people would look at the pictures, they would infuse the images with their experience. So
right.
even if I had an intentionality with a certain image, you would see it, and because you have a completely different set of lived experiences, you would
Hmm.
see something else. And that, because I mean, you don't get that in film because it's
No.
very, they tell you what's going on. I mean, well, they
Hmm.
show you, but they tell you. There's
Hmm.
action, there's words.
Hmm.
In photography, it's not there. And
Right.
so I love the fact that people can deeply get associated to an image just by
Right.
osmosis, right? So, and that's when I was like, okay, that's when I got hooked, and I started, playing around with that. But
It's
I mean, it was, so go ahead, sir.
it's amazing when I'm thinking about this because as you're talking, like I mean, obviously there's so many photographers that have come on the scene since apps like Instagram and all that, but you're doing it here in mid '90s, meeting in Denny's. If you're in Denny's, I can just picture the Denny's and the smoke and the cups of coffee, uh, and you're meeting with film enthusiasts, and so it's interesting to me because people now it's easy to get on the gram, it's easy to get into photography because it's so broadcasty. It's like there's opportunity for growth and travel. And what was it like back then? Because I imagine was it a smaller niche back then, or was it like what was the
Sure.
energy around it, and how did you get your work seen? Like that's what I'd be interested in.
Well, I mean, obviously there were way less photographers than there are today. Just because it was, I mean, photography has always had that duality where it could be a trade or it could
Right.
be an art, depending on how you apply it and how you do it. I was obviously attracted to the art side of it. I've never been a huge gearhead and tech head. I always work with the same assistants nowadays, and literally 2 weeks ago, I had three assistants on set, and between the four of us, we had 120 years experience in
Wow.
photography,
Yeah.
which was, I mean, I love the art part of it. I love playing around with it. But yeah, back then, I mean, it wasn't what it was today, obviously.
No.
So getting it, you had to beat the pavement. Like, I mean,
Right.
you literally had to,
Well, this is what I'm
and I mean,
imagining. You said you
yeah.
went to New York. Like, how did you get to New York? Like, did you just go there and show people your stuff? Like, how did you get involved in that scene?
Well, I mean, when I went back to New York, I mean, I assisted, and I mean, and even when I assisted, it was, I showed up to New York. I pulled open the yellow pages, photographers, and I mean, literally that was it. And I just I tore the page out, and I'm like, okay.
Wow, it's like a
And then anyway,
movie.
and it was like it's like not like what it is today. And
Right.
it was actually easier to meet people because you could literally um, walk up to someone's office, knock on the door, and like come in. I mean, you can't do that anymore in New York or
No.
any big city.
Right.
There's security, there's passes, you need blah, blah, So there's there's a lot more gatekeepers now than there were back
Mm.
then. So was it more work to get to these people? Sure, yeah, like because you physically had to, go.
Hmm.
Nobody was writing letters and whatnot. But I mean, it was once we're there, it was easier to connect with people because there wasn't this. People weren't being bombarded. Like, I mean, I'm far from being like a celebrity photographer, but I get hundreds of emails per day, and I try to respond, but there's no way that you can reply to the sheer mass of images. So I could just imagine, like trying to contact art directors or magazines or creative directors today who are getting bombarded because they're on Instagram. It's easy to
Right.
find their name, find their access, but
Right.
now it's even harder because getting that connection that's harder.
Yeah.
Finding them is easier, but
Right.
connecting is much harder now.
Interesting.
So
Interesting. So I'm
yeah,
just trying to put this all in my head because I think you're telling an interesting story here. So you mid '90s, you're taking the photos, you're doing all this stuff, you're meeting people, you're assisting. Now I know for our listeners that are first discovering you or people that already know about you, you shoot big commercial jobs that end up in magazines, editorial. You don't just one day start and say, I'm doing a shoot. Like, what was those early days for you, like assisting or learning or working with other people? Like, how many years did it take before you actually did your own shoot on your own?
well, I had again, all paths lead to Rome, right? So mine was very different. I spent about a year and a half assisting in New York I was trapped. I was working with a group of assistants, and we're just going between different photographers and whatnot. So that was great. It was a great experience. When I came back, what a lot of them told me, like, Richard, take the time to experiment. Take the time to define what you want to say and how you want to say it with photography. That's what's going to set you apart. And to this day, I tell that to assistants. I mean, because because of the internet, because of digital photography, there's a lot of uniformity in photography, and people don't distinguish themselves. And I think it's important to do that. Everybody wants to right away, like gain a ton of followers and start working and making a lot of money. But I went the opposite route. When I came back from New York, I spent the better part of 2 years just creating personal work, experimenting, discovering my voice. And because I did that, when I went back to New York to meet people and present my work, I was one of the people that I met was this art director, and he says, "Hey, you know what? You should meet this girl in the gallery, and I think she'd be very interested." And they're working on a project, and I was like, "A gallery? Like, why would I?" Anyway, so whatever. I kept that for the last meeting, and I called her. I had some time, and they're like in Soho, and she says, "Yeah, come by." I was referred by this guy, so I was like, she's like, "Okay, cool, come by." And I showed her my work, and she spent literally 45 minutes, didn't say a word, just flipping through my book, like slow as molasses in winter. It was like just analyzing every single page. And she closed it, looked at me, and she said, "I'll be right back," and left. Came back half an hour later. I had no idea what was going on. And they're like, "Hey, we're doing an exhibit in Kobe, Japan." You were just in Japan, right? So
yeah.
Yeah. In Kobe, Japan, there's a museum that they opened up. It was a museum dedicated to fashion. There's a whole wing that was dedicated to fashion photography, and they were celebrating 100 years of fashion photography. So they had this huge exhibit they were putting together, and they had all the masters that were there, but they also had a section for the up-and-coming talent. And they, right there on the spot, they're like, "We love your storytelling. We love your eye. Would you want to be included in this exhibit, in this section? We would need like 3 pictures." And I'm like, and I said yes. Little did I know that I had to pay for the print and blah, blah, blah. So, well, yeah, no, because I mean, it was like, they're like, "Here, this is what we need, ship it, and we'll hang it, and you'll be credited."
Wow.
So I had no money. I was poor. So I literally sold my cameras. I sold all my gear. I printed the 3 pictures, sent them, shipped it, and it was in the exhibit, and it was a gamble, but it worked.
It worked.
When it launched, and obviously, I'm there in an exhibit next to greats like Avedon and Irving Penn and Helmut Newton, and I mean, again, with a whole slew of other photographers. But yeah, a lot of people noticed my work, and I got an agent literally maybe a month after, and
wow.
I started working. So it was a gamble. And that's the kind of thing. It was like there's a flow to it. You know what I mean? There's like a serendipity. It's just like I wasn't forcing. I wasn't trying to make things happen. I was more in a state of allowing, and things just went naturally, one after the other. But I mean, I respected my process and how I wanted to go about it, and I really wanted to have, somewhat. I mean, obviously, my look and my signature has evolved over 25 years, but the foundation of that was solidified in those 2 years of just playing around, experimenting.
I can imagine that was in that moment you're afraid because you're like, this is a big cost. I've got to put a lot on the line. Will this pay off? But obviously, you saw a huge win. Did you see the work come in right away? Did it take some time? Like, what was that like, that journey for you?
I mean, it was, I mean, the invitations started to come in. Like I worked with that agency for the better part of a year. And then, like there's like some editorial, some great connections, going to fashion shows with them and whatnot in New York. But it was also at the time where I had my first child. And I saw that where this was going, it was the momentum was starting to build up. And I knew that I was like, wait a sec, I didn't put a child into this world not to see them. And so I made a conscious decision to step back. I was like, guys, I can't be here full time for this. My family is in Quebec, in Montreal. so I could come back and forth and whatnot. And they were very old school, and they were like, they respected my decision, but they're like, look, you're either here or you're not. And I'm like, all right. So I came back, and then I started working here. I started presenting my work to different like magazines here. I got an agent here in Montreal, and at the same time I decided to explore Paris. And I had a friend of mine that he was
this late 90s, early 2000s?
This is like early 2000, like late 90s, early 2000s. And I went to Paris. I slept on a few couches. got actually, I have a good story. I'll get back to that later. But I mean, eventually, like maybe like 6 months later, I met someone who was just starting out her agency, and she was African. She was from Cameroon, and we connected. And like she was like, she had this energy about her, and she was just the enthusiasm just like engulfed me and everybody who met her. And I'm like, yes, let's try it. And I'm like, why not? And then again, I started shooting for magazines over there, and then here, and then it just started building up. But it was a nice pace. It wasn't it wasn't the explosion of overnight success. You're shooting for Italian Vogue. Like, no, it wasn't that. But it was a slow build up. It was a build up that I could sustain and that I could manage, of flying back and forth with and having a family. So yeah, that was the beginning.
So then you're on your feet. Fast forward, you're doing this stuff. What does a day in the life of Richard Bernadin look like when you're doing a commercial shoot? What does it look like? How does that work? Does say Vogue reach out to your agent and they say, come do this? Like, walk us through the process of shooting an editorial scene and what that looks like for you, and how many people are involved? Like,
well, I mean, shooting an editorial and shooting like a commercial fashion client, although they do seem to be in the same vein, are very different. It's two different mandates. So there's the thing about editorial, and I mean it still applies to this day, is that you're doing it to get visibility. That's right. How it's the easy. Like, to answer your question before, how do you get eyeballs on your work? And that question remains to this day, and it's the reason why Instagram works, is that the potential for people to see your work is greater than just having, like I have a great website, but I mean, if people don't know you're there, there's not going to be any traffic to it. So the at the beginning of my career, the emphasis was put on editorial, because editorial, although it doesn't pay a lot of money, does give you the visibility, whereas you're credited in the portfolio. So I mean, I remember doing this, like in Paris, I did this editorial for Grazia. Grazia is this international publication. They have different editions, in Paris, in Italy, in London. They have one in the States now. And they asked me to do this shoot. And again, very cinematic, very glamour, very beautiful. So, and I've always used, rewind. First passion was film. My second passion was architecture, and my third passion was photography. So architecture is another thing that comes into play a lot into the way I shoot in my photography. So this magazine Grazia called me, and they're like, hey, we want to do this shoot. It's glamour. It's all about black and gold. And I'm like, oh, I love black and gold, so that's great. That's cool. And so I sat down with the producer and I said, okay, I need a location that's reminiscent of that 70s style of architecture. So we went through like these databases, and we found this place like maybe an hour outside of Paris. We drove there, we saw it. It was stunning. Like, it was everything. I was like, wow. Like, the production values was just insane, right? So we're like, yes, amazing. So we put the team together. Hair, makeup, styling. The stylist works closely direct, because they work directly with the magazine. And then we did the casting. We went, we did the shoot. It was great. Now, fast forward 2 months later, this creative director who works at the time he worked for Chloe, and he worked also for this other brand. He was a consultant for like several brands, but a very big creative director who lived in Paris but traveled extensively, picked up the magazine, and they were planning the next shoot for this really big client in China. And it's like, we want to revamp the image. We want something that's more new. And then he saw that shoot, and he goes, wait, this is this is it. This is exactly what I want. And so looked at the name, saw the name, called, they got the name right. And right away, just that one editorial which paid maybe €1,000. Well, I shot with that client for, 3 campaigns per year for 8 years. Traveled the world for them. So that's the beauty of, so the difference, like, again, another difference is that you're more, the point of doing the editorial is to at least give the most of your essence in your work through the editorial, because it is such a venue that people say, hey, you know what, I love this, this is what I want. Because when you get to a commercial job, even if they love your portfolio and they love everything that you're about, they're going to have demands, they're going to have, all this stuff. So it's you have to dial it back to a certain degree. So the back then, especially, where you had to get to, and people fought for those. I mean, not physically, but you had to fight for those publications because there were very few, and there's only a certain amount of pages for that. Whereas today, you can do a great shoot and promote it on your Instagram, and tens and hundreds of thousands of people are going to see it. You didn't have that possibility back then, so you really had to put all your effort into creating the most beautiful work for your editorial, and obviously for your clients also. But editorial is what got you the clients.
So how is it when you're working on site? You're doing a commercial shoot. Is the client over your shoulder? How involved are they in the outcome of the process?
Well, again, because I have such a signature look, most clients that come towards me, they're like, hey, we want, what you do.
We want the Richard Bernardin look. Yeah.
We want the Bernardin look. And so then it becomes a great collaborative process. And I always approach a new client kind of like a client going to see a doctor. Like I want to hear what your symptoms are. And then I will make a diagnosis to what I think is the solution to your problem. Because nowadays there's a lot of self-diagnosis. And, this is what I need. And I'm like, so you might think that's what you need, but realistically, and often having these conversations with people, they realize, they're like, hey, wait a sec, you're right. Like that's not what I need. This is what I need. And for example, like I don't do e-commerce. It's like it's at my rate. You wouldn't want to pay me to do that. But but I tell that to clients. I'm like, hey, you know what? Your budget is great. It's interesting. It's every budget is respectable. I always say that. People, you have to save up money to do these campaigns.
Right.
So everything's respectable, but it's what they expect to get out of it is the thing that I try to guide them. I'm like, wait a sec, you have an internal an in-house photographer shooting all your ebook. You don't need me to redo that. You need me to create your hero shots, and you don't need 20 of them. You need 4.
Right.
And then, okay, cool. And so I guide them that way. And then I talk to them and I hear what they want. I hear what they like. And then I say, hey, well, and I try to always create a story. Again, coming back to my film. This is the story I would see for your brand. Right. And they're like, oh, cool. And then once we've determined that we want to work together, and then I sit down and then I'll do a little storyboard, a little mood board. I'll write. I love writing. You could tell all my posts and on Instagram, they're always, I don't know if people read them, but I write them. I love writing. So I write a little story, and that helps guide the whole team towards a common goal to telling the story for the brand. And then
have you ever had a client say, okay, we don't like this, you need to reshoot?
I've never reshot a campaign.
Wow, that's incredible. That's amazing, actually.
Well, wait, let me rectify that. I did reshoot one campaign, but it wasn't because of my fault. It was more because the client, we did a shoot, it was for like swimwear or whatever. And then the client had a discussion with the styling team, and they wanted to go in a certain direction. And then finally which is not something I was necessarily involved with. Right. And so when I presented the images, they're like, hey, these are great, but this doesn't represent exactly what we want.
Right.
And they gave me a check, and they paid for that shoot, and they said, hey, can we do another shoot?
Oh.
And I'm like,
So it wasn't
oh,
buy one, get one free.
no. It was like, it's our, we didn't express to you during the shoot that this is not
That's
exactly what
true.
we wanted.
That's
And
true.
you did it. The shots were great and they
Yeah.
paid for it. And then
Yeah.
we shot. But that was in 25 years. That's the only time that I've had to redo a shoot.
So let me ask you this. So, okay, so you've got this whole story, you're shooting, you're doing these commercial stuff. You're a successful commercial photographer during the 2000s. Instagram comes on the scene. And obviously it's a photo app. What's your initial thoughts towards that? And looking from someone who had already been in the industry for 10 to 15 years, making money and doing quite well. What are you thinking about that at the time?
I truly enjoyed Instagram when it came out because again, it's a question of getting people to know your work.
Mm-hmm.
I've met photographers, especially like when I was starting out, or when everybody's like in coffee places, or you meet them at the lab. That's where you would meet them. Like
Right.
everybody's dropping off their film, and you're like, oh, hey, hi, and you're looking at contact sheets and you're talking. And I've met photographers who today I don't know where they are, and they were absolutely brilliant. But if nobody knows you're there, so the idea of Instagram was great. I loved it. And I mean, it took off like really well for me at first. Like, I mean, this is the second account that I had to create because my account was hacked. So,
oh, I didn't know that. What year?
Yeah,
what year was it hacked?
That's like maybe I would say right before, like 2019.
Wow, I didn't know that. Is it still floating out there somewhere?
No. I mean, I didn't. Again, like I had like maybe 70 or 75,000 followers. It was going well, and then next thing I know, like it was like this jumbled mess, and I tried to find a way around it.
It's like impossible.
It took me like no, it was, and I mean they didn't have like whatever. It wasn't. It's still hard to reach them now, but I mean 4 or 5 years ago it was even harder.
Yeah.
And then somebody I initially found I found somebody from Instagram, and they told me, they're like, look, there's nothing we can do. It's like all the information is a mess. So we're sorry. And I was off Instagram for 6 months because you're like, wait a sec. Like I mean,
pretty discouraged. Like you built all this stuff for years, like 2019, that's like 9 years of work.
Yeah. So it was, So, and then it took me 6 months and I'm like, all right, you know what? It's not going away. So I need to get back on the bandwagon. But I mean, I saw that it was a huge look. I mean, I've been since 2019, 2020. What was that? Almost 4 years now, and it's a slow crawl, but it's okay. You know what? I'm not doing it for numbers or for whatnot. For me, it's another way to showcase my work,
for sure,
and for people to appreciate it. But I mean, I think it's important to get it out there. And I mean, there are people that do it well. I mean, great. I mean, I feel that I'm. I don't know. I'm doing what I can with it. It's great, but I'm showcasing my work. I show people it. I try to talk about what I do, how I do it, and the inspiration behind it. And I think it's a great place for people to discover new work and to show their work. So, I mean, do you
think it's helped the photography world? Like, I mean, overall, like going back to the days when you're meeting with your friends to seeing these incredible flux of photographers. What's your thought towards that? Like, are you excited about that? Does that make you think like, I'm pumped to see this? Or does it kind of make you kind of cringe a bit because it's like, oh, everyone's just getting on the bandwagon because of social media? What's your feeling towards as a professional photographer?
Not enough or too much of anything is not good. I mean, I feel that the difference was, and I can pinpoint the difference between my first account and this account, was that it was newer back then, and people weren't accustomed to being, for lack of a better word, bombarded by so many images. Whereas now, like I read in the New York Times, I think that a North American is subjected to. That's on Instagram and on social media or whatnot, or TV or Netflix, whatever, is bombarded with over 20,000 pictures a day, easily.
Each person. Oh wow.
Yeah. I mean, because you're scrolling, you see something else, and you scroll.
Internet, it's everywhere.
Internet, exactly, it's everywhere. So, and what does that do? Is that it creates a
Almost a
a
numbness, I
blasé.
think. I
It's
think
a
it's a
numbness,
numbness
exactly.
because you're
Yeah,
just like been there,
exactly.
done. I find that too on Instagram. It's like,
Yeah,
even now with the reels, like the videos,
yeah,
you really have to do something that grabs people's attention because even the most beautiful, most epic isn't grabbing people's attention anymore. They're like,
no,
been there,
no,
done that. Like, unless you're like
yeah,
so funny or so controversial, it's like
right,
even the most beautiful thing, it's hard for it to stop people in their tracks where they actually sit and appreciate. I know when I'm
totally.
editing a photo, I'm looking at every detail, but I'm like, I don't know. People are probably just scrolling past it so fast. They're not even seeing anything.
No, exactly. That's the thing. So, we're our intentionality is great when creating our images,
Hmm.
but I mean, they're this big, and people are just, so it's like you said it, numbness. There is a
Yeah.
numbness that comes with that, and I feel that that's what has slowed it down, just because of the sheer quantity of images that we're exposed to,
Wow.
which is, I mean, look, it's not bad, but it's not great either. I feel
Mm.
that when you read, I always tell my assistants or my mentorees, less is more. Like,
Right.
like, I never go see a client with 200 pictures ever.
Wow.
Like, I have physical portfolios, and there's 40 pictures. Imagine, I've been
Right.
shooting for 25 years. I've got thousands of images, and
Hmm.
all I'm showing is 40 pictures.
Wow.
That's it. I mean, you might not, like, if I go back and see you a month later, it might not be the same 40 pictures, but that's all you're seeing. So
Right.
less is more, and I think that applies to anything. Like,
Mhm.
I'm a geek. Like, I love superhero movies. When they came out, I was like over the moon. Imagine me. I grew up reading pretty much every comic book out there,
Right.
and I'm getting fatigued by superhero movies. This is
Right.
just too much.
Right.
So I think that
Too much
if you
is
can
too
find a
much.
way to, too
Exactly.
much is too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No, that's a good point. And it's hard because I feel like in this world of social media, people are trying to keep up. You've got these algorithms that are changing things by the day. You have new apps appear all the time, which it sounds great, but then it's just more divided attention. Now I've got to post on 6 different apps, that's everyone's attention is being diverted. Before it was all at
yeah,
Instagram and now it's in a million places. And so I
yeah.
feel like it's your head is spinning. But do you think like it's just an interesting thing because people how do we get back to the art of photography? Like, what would your encouragement be to people that are on social media that are throwing up posts that are photographers? We're talking people who are
Hmm.
interested in taking
Yeah.
photos. How do we get back to the art of creating beautiful imagery? Like, what would be your encouragement?
Slow it down.
Hmm.
Like, I truly slow it down. Like, when it comes to, I mean, I can't do it with commercial clients because they always have these crazy deadlines.
Hmm.
But when I do my own personal work, or when I do even, I do a lot of portrait sessions for. That's something that I started doing like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Um, and I tell people, like, I literally slow it down. They're like, "Oh, when can we see these images?" I always tell them 2 months. They're like, "What?"
Hmm.
I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, they're there in your computer." I'm like, "I know." But I mean, I did a post about this, and I actually did a Zoom class about this, where the time where you're creating, your mind is in a certain frequency
Hmm.
to create. You're looking at different things, that, elements and composition and light and whatnot.
Hmm.
It's not the time to edit images. It's not the time to do selects. That's a completely different thought process. And so
Yeah.
what I love to, and that comes from, back in the day, is like, you shoot 10 rolls of film, you bring it to the lab, and they're like, "Okay, we'll come back in a week. We'll have your contact sheets then." And you're
Right.
like, and then
Hmm.
that separation between the time you shot it and the time you can look at the images
Hmm.
gives you a completely new perspective. You're
Hmm.
fresh, you're looking at things, and then you could see things in a more calm and a more intentional way. And
Hmm.
you can make selects that are more, aligned with what you're trying to say with your creative process. And so I do that to this day.
Which is so different from the social media world because the social media world is instant. Take a photo, even clients, even with me, just because I do heavy social. So it's more like,
Right.
here's this, can we have it by Friday type of thing? And the pressure's on. How do we get away from that? How do we afford the time as creators to have that talking relationship in a world that's so instant?
You have to make it. I mean, I tell people that that's just the way I work.
Right.
If you
Yeah, you've
like
drawn a
the
line in the
it,
sand.
yeah, I've drawn a line. I was like, if
Yeah.
you like the images that I create,
Right.
there's a process to getting there.
Right.
This is my process. We can accelerate it for sure. Yeah, but I mean, I do make the exception. Again, like I said, clients, like big advertising clients that have deadlines, but I still try. Like I tell them, like I did a campaign 2 weeks ago, but like, hey, we need to have selects by the end of the day, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I mean, if you want me to create the images that you like, give me the time, and I'll do the selects tomorrow. At least I have a buffer where but it's not instantaneous, because I mean, switching back and forth on the spot, for me, it doesn't work. That's just maybe.
It's important to note the creative process, that it does go in like waves. You know what I mean? Like, first of all, you've got to conceptualize, like, well, what am I shooting? Then you've got to find that window to shoot it, because you've got to like get all the elements need to align. Then you need to shoot it. And when you're shooting, your brain, I find sometimes for me, just because of what I do, the pressure's on, and sometimes I'm so in the pressure of the moment that I'm not actually enjoying the process of taking the photo. Like, where it's like, I'm not even really thinking creatively like I want to, because I'm on such a timeline just to get the shot, that I'm not actually getting a unique or creative shot, which I feel is like one of the pressures of that social has brought, which I don't love. So I love the idea that you're saying, like, especially when communicate to client, if you want to work with me, I'm going to need some time. I'm going to need some time to really conceptualize, to really give myself a flow of, like, when I'm in the moment. Maybe you go out and shoot and you're like, I don't love that, I'm going to redo it, or it takes some time. As versus like, I've got clients like, where's the shots? When can we expect these? It's like, I literally just got the product, or, what I mean? Like, we're talking like tomorrow type thing, which is such not a good place creatively. I think it leads to burnout.
It does. Like it like, I mean, you can push through it, the first couple of months, even couple of years, but eventually what happens is that there's a fatigue that sets in. Mental fatigue, physical fatigue, and then what happens is you start, your standards are, whatever your standards are for creating and for delivering, or, whatever your process is, everything starts to be affected by that. And it does build up to that. I mean, I've gone through it.
So, I was just going to ask you that. For you, like, have you've 25 years, 30 years shooting, have you experienced burnout more than once? What did you do? How long was your break? How did you refresh? Did you ever think you'd come back to photography? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, like, during the pandemic, it slowed everything down, and I couldn't, and most of my work was abroad, so like I couldn't travel like anybody else, right? So it like literally died overnight, and you're like, wait a sec. So I'm forced to stop. I'm forced to look at my situation, and reevaluate. I'm like, wait, this feels good, but I'm like, I can't, there's no way I can sustain this. And and then I just, we'll talk about that later with the book, but that's where the book came from. Is that, I knew I was turning, 50, that I was, getting to that milestone of 25 years. And I'm like, wait, I love what I do, but I cannot see myself working at that rate for another 25 years. Impossible. So I had to reevaluate, and even then slow it down even more. And so what does that mean? If I have to slow it down, that means I have to take less on. And so if I take less on, then whatever the work I do, the value has to, equate to the energy and the input and what I'm putting into it. So there's a big evaluation on that. And yeah, again, social media affects everybody. It affected me, especially when I lost that account. And I'm like, wait, do I feel validation by people liking my? Because I've never done that. Like in my work, I've always said that, and it holds true. I do work that speaks to me, things that I want to do, that I want to express. Whether or not you like the images is not a concern of mine. What I do want is I want the images to be impactful, that you remember the images. And that happens, like, I would say 90% of the time, where people are like, oh, wait. And then even to a certain degree, like, people, it's crazy, because I don't know if it's me and I'm losing my memory, but people describe images to me, my own images. I'm like, wait, what image? And they're going into these detail. I'm like, oh, wow. And they're like, oh, that's crazy that you did that. And I was like, because I don't agree with blah, 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 blah. But I said, but you remembered it at that granularity, which is which is what I love. which is, so I think that, yeah, but I mean, to answer your question, yes, I think we need to find a place where we're comfortable and we feel good and we feel aligned with what we're doing, and that we can't let ourselves be fatigued, because in the end we're artists. I mean, I know we had this conversation, the last time we saw each other in Banff, but I don't consider myself a content maker. For me, the word, it speaks volumes to the amount of work that others expect from us. I'm like, no, I'm not creating volume. I'm creating specific works of art that are applicable to different, uses and purposes. So I consider, that's why, So that's why I don't ever use, for me anyway, content creating or whatever. I'm an artist, and so I slow it down, and this is the way I produce. And I think that as artists, we should all find a way to do it. I mean, within reason. I mean, you can't, it has to work for you. But I mean, there's a way to slow it down and to make it more meaningful and impactful.
I think it's interesting for people that are listening to this, because there is that pressure on social. People taking photos, we're gauging by metrics, a popularity contest. But of all the creators I know, you're probably the one that's making the most money. So I want people to be encouraged that they can find success as a creator and a true artist outside of social media. That social media almost is like, there's reality there, but there's some fakeness in the sense of like it gives a false narrative, because it's just numbers, and so you got 1 million views. What does that actually relate to you personally? And so I think anybody that's really serious about their art, or maybe you love taking photos, you want to get more serious, I think you're a great example to look to as someone who has been able to carve out a very successful career, beautiful art, beautiful imagery, commit to the craft, and go beyond those things and really live a successful life. Do you feel successful?
Thank you. That was really.
I mean that so seriously. But do you feel that? Do you sit back and look and go, like, I'm successful, like I've achieved something? Like, I listen to your journey and your story, and so it's like a movie to me. I was thinking, who could play you in this movie? But like, do you feel like you sit back and relax and go, like, I'm doing what I love and I'm pumped about it, like I'm excited?
I think that somebody once told me, and it's always stuck. It always stuck with me, is that we're never done. And we're never going to be done, because it's, you establish you establish a new goal, you establish something that you want to create, and you're like, cool, that's something you're working towards. And once you get there, well, there's work to get there, and that's part of the journey. And when you get there, there'll be something else after, and it's a continual process. I don't think. And it's tacky to say, but it's so true. Life is not a destination. Neither is a career. It's the steps that you take along the way to get there. It's the journey. And every step, I mean, like I said, when you're in the flow, when you're trusting the process and trusting your decisions, and not wavering like some little branch in the wind, you have a conviction, and you trust it, and you take the steps to go towards it.
Right.
Things will lead on, and to this day, I'm always surprised by, like, sometimes the opportunities that present themselves. I'm like, wow, I remember that I wanted to do this 10 years ago, but I forgot about it. But hey, here.
And then you find yourself in that moment. You're like, huh?
Yeah. And there you go. So wow. I mean, do I consider I consider myself successful in the sense that I live a comfortable life with my family, and by doing what I love, and so to me that's a success.
There couldn't be anything better than that, don't you think? No. Just being able to get up every morning, be so excited about your day, get to do the things you love, and be with the ones you love. I think that is the ultimate.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I mean, and then like you said, I mean, yes, there's been great successes, and there's been great. I mean, life it's a roller coaster. So I mean, I've had like amazing successful stories and great, and then I've had tragic stuff that happened in my career also. But I mean, I think it's a question of, again, I believe in what I do, and I believe that I grew. I grow from everything that happens, good or bad, and especially the bad. you learn so much more from mistakes than you do from
Totally.
success. So
Totally.
I think that, do I regret them? I don't. I mean, do you want to repeat them?
Yeah.
That's another thing. No,
That's
but
the thing. It's almost like in life, there's so many things I think about my life, and I don't know if I would do anything different because I don't know if I'd be where I am. And so if you
yeah,
omit a failure or something gone wrong out of your life, it almost takes away the lessons that you're learning, you know?
totally,
And do
totally.
you want that lesson or not? And I mean, it's not like we're all jumping up and down to learn the hardest thing, but at the
No,
same time,
no,
omitting things, and I think back about things, oh, I could have done that better. You can't kick yourself. It is what it is. We
it
grow,
is.
we
Yeah,
learn. As long
yeah,
as you got an
yeah.
open heart and you're ready to grow. Do you feel okay? Let's. I was going to ask you another question, but I want to talk about the book because we talked about the pandemic, and I think the pandemic put that pause on everything. And the whole
Yeah,
world was shut down, and everybody was forced to take that little, you know,
break. Yeah,
take stock of their life and look around and go, am I happy? Am I doing what I love?
yeah,
What do I do now? Like, oh my gosh. Because when you slow down, you're forced to look at things. When you're in the go
for
mode, you're
sure.
like, ah. When you slow down, you're like, start to see the things around you go and like, oh wow, this is, yeah, exciting.
Yeah.
Uh, so for you, you say the idea for the book came to you during the pandemic.
I mean,
Talk,
well,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, I mean, I mean, I've always wanted to do a book, obviously, because I have such an accumulation of work, and I'm like, hey, and like I said, storytelling. I love to tell, there's always the aspect of
Mm-hmm.
how did this image come about, or what
Mm-hmm.
happened during this shoot that's memorable to me, or that was So the idea was always there, but I'm like, wait a sec, like I saw the convergence of that
Right.
the timing of turning 50 and
Mm-hmm.
25 years. I'm like, wait, this could be a great,
Great
and for
time.
me, it was a marker for like a very important place in my career, in my life, and like pre-book, and then now after, once it's done, post book. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
that it was important for me to do that. So I explored different options to creating the book. Publishers, blah blah, whatever, and different creative agencies, and I found out, I discovered that this was something that I had to do myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
I needed to. Not that I don't want to work with publishers or like, there's a lot of amazing creative agencies out there that I would love to work with, but I felt that this was a it was a therapy for me. It was like it's something I needed to do. I needed to
Mm-hmm.
exercise things out of my system,
Mm-hmm.
to analyze, to accept, to forgive, to love, to celebrate. It was all this combined, and that's what the book represents for me.
So the
And it's a
book is
way. Yeah,
explain to
yeah.
people that if they do you have a copy of the book there that you can show us?
I know, because
You don't have one, Richard.
no,
Explain
no,
to
no.
people what the
Well,
book
no.
is, because when people hear book, like is it a novel? Like what? Explain to people what they can expect
So
of the book, and what is
yeah.
what's the journey as they look through the book?
Well, okay. To answer your question first, why I don't have a book? Because we're going to print in August. That's
Okay,
why we're doing. I was doing the pre-sale, which was a way of funding a
right,
certain portion of the book in the
right.
printing, because I mean the cost can be pretty
Exorbitant, yes,
astronomical.
yeah.
Yeah, and so it's a coffee table book. It's a very high end coffee table book. It's a very big. I think it's going to be somewhere like 10.5 by 13 inches.
Okay,
200 and some pages, hardcover with a dust jacket. So yeah, it's a very big, beautiful book.
it's a statement.
Um, it's a statement.
It's a
It's an
piece of
objet
art
d'art.
on the coffee
There you
table.
go. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly
And
it.
people are flipping through,
Uh,
they're seeing images of their stories or any captions to
there's
attach to the.
captions. There's stories. There's going to be some forwards by friends or associates that I've worked with,
Beautiful.
and so yeah. So it's over 140 images are going to be in the book, and I didn't want to get into the nostalgia, because I mean, 25 years is a lot of photography. I mean, there's no way I can. And again, I had to work at it backwards. I knew that, okay, wait, I'm doing this pre-sale. I'm putting a certain amount into it. I'm trying to raise a certain amount, and within the realm of what that's going to cost, I know approximately how many pages, or how
Right.
big, and the parameters of that. So I knew that there was no way I could afford to do a book that explored, like, in a somewhat chronological order, my entire career. That's, there'd be way too many images, and so
Right.
I decided to go through my career and like a certain amount of images that have marked certain eras of my life, or there's something special that or meaningful to me, or the collaborations, or the whatever. There's reasons for there's a reason for every image in that book, and they're very deeply personal, and I try to share that with the public in the book. And so yeah, I think it's an intimate journey, but curated. It's
Right.
not, there's no linear, it's just presented and very simply. Also, that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to work with a creative agency, because that it wasn't about design. It's a
Right.
very simple layout, photo, blank page, small text.
Nice.
That's it. Very clean.
Beautiful.
It's about the work. There's no
Beautiful.
graphics. There's nothing.
Beautiful.
So,
and where can
thank you.
people learn more about it, find out about it, order it, or get hands on a copy when it comes out?
When it comes out, I mean, you'll be able to order it. I mean, you could order it now. You could pre-order a book, reserve it. I've sold. I'm very happy with the amount. Like, I've sold enough to go to print, and that's why.
Awesome.
That's
Great news.
where I'm at now. Yeah, it's very exciting. So I'm in the pre-press right now. We're finalizing the layout, just, making sure there's corrections, and then in August it goes to press, then binding and whatnot, blah blah blah, in September, and the book should be ready by end of September, early October.
Perfect Christmas gift. Perfect.
Yeah,
Christmas
exactly.
Gift.
Yeah. So yeah, Richard Bernadin, fineart.com.
Okay, Richard Bernardin, fineart.com. Everybody go there and check out the book and purchase it for a Christmas gift, or for just a gift.
Or
Thanksgiving
just
gift, Halloween
exactly.
gift.
Exactly.
Treat yourself gift, whatever kind of gift you want.
Whatever gift you want.
Whatever gift you want. There's no reason. You don't need a reason. You just buy it. This has been such a great conversation. Just once again, like I said, as you've told your story, and I'm sure there's so much more to it. I think artists that are listening to this are going to be encouraged. Obviously, the book is a celebration of 25 years of work, 50. Coming to this now, as we come to a close, what would the 50-year-old Richard Bernardin, who is successful, who has achieved his goals and doing his dreams, tell that young kid that was very first interested in art and photography? What would be your advice if you could pass that to him now? What would you say?
You know what? I would probably, if I were to meet him, I would just pat him on the back and say, and smile, because if I change anything, the results wouldn't be the same today. So, and we said that before. I don't go back. I don't live in the past. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. There's success and whatnot. And we don't have the capacity to go back and to change it. And if we did, well, we see with all those Marvel movies what would happen. So I think I did what I needed to do. I mean, obviously there's different things that you could do, but I mean, to follow, it's my intuition, just because everybody's going to have, a solution. Everybody's going to have an idea. I mean, people are going to guide you, but it's always within, and it's never with malintent, but it's always guided towards their perception of what is good for you. I believe that when you're truly connected with yourself, meaning, you're not lying to yourself, you're like, you can come to terms with where you are. And if you take the time to reflect, then you're always guided towards doing the right decision. So, I mean, sometimes, like I said, I mean, I made mistakes, and had I done something different, what would the results be? I don't know. But I'm happy with where I am now, and I'm excited with what is yet to come. So.
Well, that was a great answer. Actually, I love that answer. Just affirming your younger self to just do what you did, to live the journey, to walk the road, because it's really important. Richard, thank you so much for your time today. This conversation has been so encouraging. I'm just pumped. I'm inspired by the things you've said. I hope that every creator, aspiring artist listening to this feels inspired by your journey, a true pioneer of photography, and looks at their creative output and reassesses some of the ways that they're doing things. Because I think that slow down, take your time, put yourself into your work, and define your craft, I think, is so important. And we're excited for the book. We're excited for your future and for all that you're going to be doing. And so thank you. Everyone go follow Richard on his socials. Help him get back up to that 70K.
No, but seriously, thank you. Like, this was, talking with you is just like, it's, it's great. And I love sharing, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to,
of course,
to
you're an inspiration to all of us, Richard. We love you. We love your work, and we love who you are as a human. And you're a beautiful person. So thank you for contributing your time today. Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Socality Show today. If you're liking this content, make sure to like and subscribe, and you can listen to this wherever you get your podcasts. And so we'll see you again on the next Socality Show.